And I used to see that a lot, where people would want to know why something terrible happened. And they would be really begrudging to be able to move forward without having that answer.
Man found dead over the random attack.
About a spike in domestic violence.
How's it going, Dave?
Cool, how are you?
I am doing really good.
You're wearing poppy today.
I know, and you've got a very important shirt today
Yes.
as well. We're going to talk all about that.
Yeah.
Why we're representing what we're representing today.
Absolutely.
We're talking about legacy.
Yes.
Something that is oh so important for so many families who are grieving loss.
Yes.
And we've learned a lot of lessons throughout, this podcast.
Yeah.
And for those who have read your book as well. And it really is kind of like a guidebook of sorts, right? And that was a big reason as to why you wanted to even put pen to paper and jot down all of these lessons.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, as we said in a previous episode, it seems so long ago now, tomorrow's not a promise for anybody.
Yeah.
And so I believe that, and I guess it depends on where you are in your life. If you're young and you're raising a young family, you might have a different perspective on it. But as you kind of get to the twilight of a career that you loved and then you've since left, you start to reflect a little bit more on some of the other things that are going to be important. And some of those things are things like legacy. And for me, that's become a really important part of my purpose now.
Yeah.
And why I feel so compelled to be able to put together a podcast, to create books, to have my thoughts and my perspectives out there. I mean, certainly, I am happy to share it with audiences, viewers, listeners, but really, these are all meant to be shared with generations that I may never know, because my day tomorrow isn't promised. And I want one day for a grandson or a granddaughter or a great-grandson and a great-granddaughter to be able to watch or read or see something or come to a special place, like a cabin in the woods, and feel connected to me.
Yeah.
And that's what legacy for me is, and building legacy now I think is so, so important.
Yeah, it's really neat that you want to do that for future generations because, without even really knowing, that was kind of the impact your own grandfather had on you, right? Because you knew about his history, and now that you've also included him in the book, you're opening the door to your future generations to also get to know who he was and keep the ancestry alive. We
talked about it way back in episode 1, where we talk about how important this idea is, of legacy and that my grandfather and stuff. I really think that we can find pieces about ourselves when we look into our ancestry.
Definitely.
And we had touched on that earlier. I had a story that came up just a little while ago where I love these treasure hunting shows. I don't know why, but I'm hooked.
Yeah.
Right? I think there's something about my mind. It plays this idea of going to find the lost treasure or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think and I don't know where that ever came from. And then just this past Christmas, my mom shares this story of a great-grandfather that I certainly did not know, who died in the Yukon during the gold rush.
Oh, no way.
And I wonder to myself right then and there.
Yeah, it's in your blood.
Is it? It could
Very
be.
well could be. Yeah.
And that is, that's why I think it's so important to for all of us to, work towards, creating a legacy.
Definitely.
For future generations, so that they can see that you lived a life that mattered.
Lived a life that mattered. And it's kind of a neat way to put it into perspective if you think about how you want to be seen by your future generations. How do you want them to look back on you as a person and speak of you?
That's right.
Right? And so you should kind of strive to live your life that way and to represent them well.
And you know, I've had some amazing mentors in my career, families that, you know, maybe their loved one wasn't of the right age or just passed so suddenly that they themselves didn't have an opportunity to create a legacy.
Yeah, right.
But they took the torch and they created legacy in their loved one's name.
Yeah.
And that is really the inspiration behind this whole idea for me. And it was through these incredibly strong, courageous people who recognized that this was important to them, to their healing, and to allowing their son or daughter, brother or sister, aunt and uncle an opportunity to their name to remain in our community,
Definitely.
to continue to make impact in our community, and to be loved that way. And I know for sure that you have a story about legacy and a friend, and I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, and I mean, I know, you know, speaking about children and infants specifically, really the legacy that their family can carry on, and the huge impact they can make. I think back on when we talked about baby Eve, who was found in a dumpster, but her short life inspired a movement, and, you know, those are the legacies that we're really talking about.
Right.
Too. And so, one that comes to mind for me that I really, you know, support as best as I can is a couple of friends of mine. So I had worked together with the husband, Ronnie, and his wife, Jessica, and they are both so extremely inspirational and just wonderful members of the community. And so around the same time I was having my first daughter, Evelyn, they were having their first son, Lewiston. So they were about a month apart. So her and I would kind of, you know, we were following along each other on social media and posting baby pictures, etc. And one day we get a post from her that says that they've been having, you know, some issues with Lewiston. He seems to be going limp in certain places, and obviously some concerns are brought up fairly early on. You know, they spent so many hours, countless blood tests and MRIs and all the imaging you can think of, only to come to the conclusion that he was diagnosed with something called spinal muscular atrophy that affects your nerves and your spinal cord. Basically, piece by piece, it just starts breaking everything down. Your lungs, your muscles, and there's different phases and different types. Unfortunately, he was diagnosed with the worst, so he was given about a year.
Oh.
Okay. So, I mean, throughout this whole ordeal, I've got my own baby that I'm like, I can't imagine the type of pain that they must be going through, and completely unfathomable and unimaginable. So I really started following her story closely. And unfortunately, Lewiston passed just shy of his 6-month birthday. But what they did from the minute they received that diagnosis to his death is they were committed to not wallow in that pain and in that horrible news, but to make this little guy's life count. We're going to have dance parties in the hospital. We're going to invite all the nurses in the ward to come and dance. They would blast Justin Timberlake, and, you know, Can't Stop the Feeling was like his signature song. They played it at his funeral and everything. So she really inspired this movement to get moving if you can. You know, so many people can't. So get up and dance, spread the joy, spread the love, you know, become a part of your community. And so through all of that, she's definitely like brought this amazing attention to this disease, and also just to bring positivity to the community and to the city. And now she's a very, you know, she's a speaker, and so she goes to a lot of events as a motivational speaker as well and tells her story. But so what they did was, to celebrate Lewiston, they planned his first birthday party would be a fundraiser where they planned to raise $10,000 for the Alberta Children's Hospital. And after that night, they raised $42,000. So they thought, well, we really surpassed our goal, and maybe we should try to do this again. So every year they have a birthday party in his honor. So this upcoming May is going to be his 8th birthday party. And they've now raised over $2 million.
Amazing.
Just throughout these events that they've hosted. So they have got his birthday party, they've got an ultra marathon, they've got a golf tournament. Like, it's insane, the legacy that they have built just for this little guy. So Love for Lewiston is the foundation.
Amazing.
And we're going to link it where we can. And I kind of urge you to go find out more and to be inspired by their story as well. Yeah, it's really touching.
It is amazing. And something I think is so important about, and something you said at the very beginning of that story, the family made that decision to not wallow, to not feel,
And how easy it would have been to do that.
So easy.
Yeah.
And I think when we think about grief and when we're going through grief, it is okay to give ourselves that opportunity and that time to grieve.
For sure. Yeah.
As long as it doesn't become so all-consuming. Because I've seen it go both ways.
Sure.
I've seen families draw closer together in grief, and I've certainly seen families draw further apart and lose themselves.
True.
Through grief.
Yeah.
And it really, a part of it is mindset.
Yeah, and you have to sit with those feelings when they come, for sure.
You do.
And only through sitting with those feelings can you move past them, I think, if you allow them the time that they're, so demanding of, really, because I'm sure so many things come up that always remind you of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's important too, to accept everything that's been happening, to sit with those feelings in order to kind of see the bigger picture.
I think one of the things that holds us back for some people is why.
Right.
Like from my experience, the need to know why can become so consuming that it robs you of the opportunity to move past an event and, create that legacy.
Yeah.
Legacy doesn't have to be a formal foundation or any of those kinds of things. It could just be a very solemn moment of reflection once a year, twice a year, 10 times a year.
Yeah.
Whatever that is.
Yeah, a tradition of sorts. It can be very simple.
It's so simple.
Yeah.
But why can rob some people of that? And I used to see that a lot, where people would want to know why something terrible happened. And they would be really begrudging to be able to move forward without having that answer.
Right.
But the problem is nobody can explain to them why something tragic has happened.
Nope.
And unless you take the path that, that one mother that we talked about took, which is that her daughter's was fated.
Yeah.
Then, finding the why is very difficult. And in cases of murder specifically, if you do get an explanation on why something happened, the person that's giving you that explanation is the offender. And that will always be minimized, watered down version, because they want to appear different.
Right. Or they'll make it their fault.
Right. I always say it's like,
fault.
It's totally. Yeah. I always say it's like, you want Rocky Road Crunch ice cream, but you're going to get vanilla.
Right.
And that's what you're going to get.
Right.
Not that there's anything wrong with vanilla ice cream.
Yeah.
It's delicious
but I know what
too.
you're saying. There's no crunch.
Yeah, there's no crunch.
Yeah.
And so, you can find people sort of toiling through this whole idea of why.
Right.
The other one that seems to really hurt or affect people is this quest for vengeance. And it's a tough one.
Yeah.
Because I can totally understand it.
Yeah.
Somebody did something to your loved one and all you can think of is vengeance. And it's so normal, so natural. I'm not suggesting that, it's not something people aren't entitled to feel.
Yeah, but it can consume you.
But if it consumes you and takes away from your own ability to remember, now it's taking more than one person.
Yes.
That's
it's robbed you of your life.
Totally.
Yeah.
And murder can do that, right? I mean, violent crime, all those kinds of things can rob us of our lives.
Right.
It's so insidious.
Yeah.
It creeps into all these different places and areas.
Yes.
And it can infect us and in ways and take down more people than
just the victim.
Just the victim in the first place.
Yeah.
And so I always used to say to folks, and my advice still to this day would be, is that it's totally unnatural to have that need for vengeance. But here is the reality. If the person is punished for the crime against, and they receive a life sentence with no parole eligibility for, say, 15 years, you're going to ask, why not 25?
Right. There's always something greater.
If you ask for 25, they're going to ask, well, why not 50?
Because they're dead set on that vengeance.
Right. If we say, okay, well, no, we're going to execute this person, they're going to say, how? Oh, we're going to do it by lethal injection. And they're going to say, no, not lethal injection. I want this person drawn and quartered like they did in the old days. You know what I mean? Like there's never going to be...
It's never enough.
It's never enough. Yeah. And that's the cycle of vengeance. And so it really becomes a difficult thing to move past unless you can kind of see a different path forward. And
so legacy can kind of be a way to encapsulate all of that. That's what it is. Right? You're reframing that energy.
It's the path forward.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a lot of other amazing foundations that we can speak of today too.
Yeah, I'd love to. One foundation that, has resonated with me for as long as I've known the family and known the story is the Nathan O'Brien Children's Foundation. And how that all began was through a terrible tragedy. A young fella by the name of Nathan was taken one night along with his grandparents and was murdered. And in the investigation that ensued, a family associate, a distant family associate, was identified and was eventually convicted and has been sitting in jail since. But through the grief of that whole entire case, and that case encapsulated the community, like the city, everybody, even the country, really. And it was one that, I worked on it intimately, and it was a big part of my July of 2014 when it happened, and August and September. Right. But through all of that, something came as a result of it that can't replace that young man. Yeah. Not on any level. Right. But it's a beautiful testament to his life and the love that his family had for him, and their acknowledgement and awareness that they needed to create something in his name and in his honor. And for his siblings too. For his siblings as well. And so they created this beautiful Nathan O'Brien's Children's Foundation. Yeah. And, by last count, and it may have changed, but I believe they service at least 11 charities within the city. Wow. Most of them children orientated. Yeah. Yeah. And they are brown bag lunch programs, sport programs, to be able to outfit kids that maybe come from backgrounds that they may not have access to the same type of equipment so they can play hockey or things of that nature. Nathan was a big hockey player. Right. I remember in February the following year after he died, that the family, their very first fundraiser was the Nathan O'Brien's Children's Foundation charity hockey game. Okay. It was held at the Saddle Dome. Yeah, wow. And it was such an honor, and such an honor to be invited to it. Yeah. I grew up as a little boy, always thinking, I'd love to play in the NHL. And just like many others. Oh, so many. And I used to dream of what it would be like standing on the blue line, sashaying back and forth, hearing our country's great national anthem sing. Yeah. Looking across and seeing your hockey heroes. Yeah. And I thought when I watched these hockey night in Canada on a Saturday night, I used to think I could do at least that. Right. And see my Jim Poplinskis and my Theon Flurries and the Dana Mersens and the Colin Pattersons of the world. These were my hockey heroes. Yeah. All part of the 89 Cup run. Right. And I thought I could at least do that. Well, that February when that charity game came about and I was invited to play in it, the immense honor that I had, showing up that day into the Saddle Dome, walking through the bowels of the building, just like all the
As an athlete.
As an athlete.
Yeah.
Yeah. A finely tuned athlete. and walking in and then being able to share in their dream of legacy.
Yeah.
As both Nathan's parents were there. Nathan's mom, our coach.
Wow.
His dad, one of the players on the team.
Yes.
Along with a brother.
Right.
And a variety of other people from the community, from politicians to sportscasters, to a country music singer.
Right.
It was a wonderful event. And we all got to watch this family begin the development of a legacy. And that night, when I stepped out onto the ice with my family still present in the stands, there was 13,000
Wow.
screaming superheroes.
Which is almost a sold out crowd.
It's getting close.
Yeah.
Kids had been encouraged to wear their favorite superhero costumes. Nathan was a huge
He
superhero.
loved wearing. That's right. That's right.
And people danced and they sang and they had, just a wonderful hockey experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Watching this foundation begin to flourish.
Right.
And I got to be a part of it. And I will always remember just, again, how thankful I was. And although skill never got me into the NHL, those dreams as a little boy, that one night when I stood on the blue line, heard our country's great national anthem, and looked across the way and saw Jim Poplinski, Theon Fleury, Dana Merz, Colin Pattison, and all the other great hockey players that I grew up watching.
I thought, this isn't how I thought I'd get here.
But I got there.
But you got there, yeah.
But all
in the
through
name of a beautiful young boy.
In the strength and courage of his family.
Yeah, yeah.
If I was to give a shout out to an organization or a foundation that I think is making a true difference in our world and in our community, this is one. And I look back on the strength of that family and the courage that they had to take those steps. But his name lives on in our city now.
It does, yeah.
And it's loved.
Yeah, it really is.
And I wish so badly that was not the case, that they even needed to create this foundation.
Of course.
But they did.
Yeah.
And they've been able to do so much to help others.
And legacy is really important in, helping families grieve, as we've talked about. Are there any things that you can think of that come to mind as you have, you've had to share the news with others that their loved one has died?
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of, thoughts on just how you can approach that? I think some people are fearful of talking about people who have passed. They don't want to bring up any negative emotions or sadness.
We talked about that earlier, just before we started the podcast, they're having a conversation about that.
Yeah.
There are certain words that people don't want to use.
Right.
Sometimes we don't want to acknowledge, we feel uncomfortable acknowledging someone that has passed, their name.
Yeah, just say
out
their
of
name.
concern that we might upset someone, right? That's not always the right approach.
No, yeah.
And I think
on the contrary, people don't want them to be forgotten, so please say their name.
Yeah,
right?
Please say their name.
Yeah.
And acknowledge them and acknowledge the loss. But also acknowledge what they brought to your life. Yeah, yeah. Because I think that's a big part of helping somebody else move through their grief. As I always felt like it was such a heavy responsibility to go into a home of somebody and announce to them that their son or their daughter had died. I always did take that as an important burden to bear, but I also recognized that their grief was going to begin that night, and I could either kind of put them almost through that notification process on a path of healing,
right,
or I could compound it,
right,
by the way I dealt with it, the way I, my deportment through it.
So give me an example of that.
Well,
obviously your intent was always to do it on the path of healing.
Right, but if you went into a situation and you showed up and you say you couldn't remember the person's name, and you have to fumble through your notebook to remember the name and then what the relationship was, or I'm here to talk to you about your son, but it's really their daughter. You know, like all of those kinds of things, which thankfully never happened to me because I was always well prepared. But think about how traumatizing that would be.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And then, you know, the second part is like, it goes to speaking about the name and just being honest and upfront with people. But like, it was always being, I'm sorry, or I'm here to talk to you about something very sad. Would you like to have a seat? Yes. Or no, I don't. What's going on? Tell me right here at the door.
Right.
You sort of followed their lead on that, whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
But you could never say, or should never say in a situation like that, has gone to a better place.
Oh, yeah.
Or passed on, or things of that nature.
Okay.
You need to use stronger, heavier language.
Right.
In a compassionate.
Right, because I would imagine the acceptance is always hard to get to, right?
Well, is
that why you kind of want to be a little more blunt in a soft way?
And it creates confusion, which creates more answers.
Yeah, better place. Where's that?
Yeah, exactly. What do you mean? They went to Mexico? No, they didn't go to Mexico. They passed on. Passed on where? I don't understand what you're talking about. You know what I mean? And so we learned long ago, if you were going to do notifications, that you just had to be honest with people. I'm sorry, but to tell you this, or this is a very difficult conversation to have with you. Your son was killed at a house party tonight.
Yeah. Do you think those are some of the worst days of your life? You probably can't ever get used to delivering that news.
You know, worst days? No, they weren't. They were days they were difficult days because it required you to have difficult conversations with people.
Right.
But again, if you took it from the attitude that this is actually a really important day,
right? Because
you're going to put them either on a path of healing, or you're going to traumatize further.
Right. That's so interesting.
And so I always chose to try and get them on that path.
And I guess if you knew you were able to do it well, you probably considered yourself fortunate to be the one to deliver that news when you knew so many others maybe couldn't do it as well as you.
I always felt like it was, I took it as a great responsibility and something that, I was actually happy that I was the person delivering the news because I knew the attitude that I had going into it. And I knew that I was going to do my very best. Yeah. Did it work every time? No, of course not. People can get very angry very quickly. They can get angry at you very quickly. Yeah, right. But for the most part.
But you know it's not directed at you.
It's not. It's just a situation.
Yeah, of course.
And so, it was... So no, it was an important part of our duty. But I often think that if we had traumatized people in that way, like differently, then their ability to see past that event would maybe not allow them to see the importance of, honoring or remembering or moving past their grief faster.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, on that note, this legacy that we speak of is so important, and we're going to do our best to include all of those links in our show notes as well, so that our viewers and listeners can also come to know these wonderful foundations and charities and so many more, because it is really important work that they're doing, and important work that you've done as well by sharing all of your experiences with us. So thank you so much. It really has been quite the ride along.
Yeah, it has.
And I really appreciate all your time and energy, and looking forward to the next book, Undaunted, as well.
Yes. And, if you want to see us continue, please drop us a like, subscribe to our channel, because it will be the support of viewers like yourself, listeners like yourself, that will allow us to do a second season into the future.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Well, we hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Ride Along. And if you're interested in learning more about Dave's career and the lessons he learned throughout, now that he's on the other side of it, be sure to pick up a copy of his book that he co-wrote with Sarah Cades called Skeletons in My Closet. And keep an eye out for his new release, Undaunted, with Susan Forrest.
My mantra of leaving people better than you found them continues to be my driver. And I hope you're leaving this podcast today feeling inspired, informed, and inclined to live your dash. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please be sure to like and subscribe. And take care, everybody. Thanks for joining us on the ride along.